of the Greater Boca Raton Beach and Park District is now called to order. It's Monday, October 5th, 2020. The time is 5:15 p.m. And Joanne, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Ernst?
Here.
Commissioner Engel?
Here.
Commissioner Rollins?
Here.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Here.
Commissioner Wright?
Here.
Thank you, Joanne. On the next item, the changes to agenda, a district council has asked that we defer item number 2, which is the Ocean Strand Declaration Amendment. He'd like to gather more information, so he'll report to you on discussion items at that time. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Brianne, public requests?
I have one public request. This is Jim Miller at 480 East Boca Raton Road, Boca Raton 33432. Madam Chair and fellow commissioners, Friends of Gumbo Limbo is pleased that the district at the last commissioner meeting confirmed a commitment to move ahead with the program to build a new ADA compliant tower at the center. The district budget, together with the donations of the Kozowski family and friends and the additional commitment of Friends of $100,000, gives a budget of $1.2 million to carry out the project. According to the study done by the city and using the design alternative that has been selected, this should be feasible at a cost of less than $1.2 million. The next step is to complete an RFP for the project and put out for bids. This will give us more definitive cost estimates, clarify any possible design issues, and provide a schedule for implementation. We look forward to seeing this done soon. At the last district meeting, there was discussion on what could be done to cover overruns. Friends understands and appreciates that concern. The estimates by the city are understood to be conservative. Friends has given suggestions on how to deal with this for an amendment that extends the MOU between the Friends and the district to February 1. In the end, an urgent matter is to complete the RFP and receive proposals to have the tower built. Thank you again for all your support of Gumbo Limbo. Sincerely, Jim Miller, President, Friends of Gumbo Limbo. So.
Are there any other hands up, Brianne?
No. No more.
Okay. This time, public requests are closed. It's time to approve the minutes of the final public trim hearing that was held virtually on September 17th, 2020. It's found on page 3 of your agenda packet. Do I hear a motion?
So
So
moved.
move. And second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Joanne, would you please do a roll call vote?
Sure. Commissioner Ernst?
Yes.
Commissioner Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Yes.
And Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, and the next item is the regular virtual meeting held on September 21st, 2020. It's found on page 5. Do I have approval for the minutes of that meeting, please, for a motion?
So move.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Joanne, would you please do a roll call vote again?
Sure. Commissioner Ernst?
Yes.
Commissioner Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Yes.
And Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, it's time for item number 1 on our regular business, the Boca Raton Beach and Park Foundation, found on page 11 of your agenda packet. Brianne, would you start us off, please?
Sure. First, I want to give some big thank you to Jacob for putting these together, the bylaws and the articles of incorporation. This was just to start the conversation and kind of put these things out there, and Jacob can answer his questions about some of the specifics in there. Down the road, obviously, we need to work out the financial needs of starting the foundation as well as the personnel needs to get this going. But this was just to get this conversation started and introduce some of the ideas to you all through these bylaws and articles of incorporation.
Thank you, Brianne. Steve, since you this was your baby, would you like to start off the discussion?
Okay, well, first I just want to review the reasoning behind it. We're entering a very, what's the word I'm looking for? We're entering a very critical phase in the course of events. We don't know what's going to happen over the next year. We don't know what course the economy is going to take. Is it going to recover? Is it going to recover quickly? Is the recovery going to be spread over the entire population? Is it going to be what somebody called a K-shaped recovery? We really, at this point, we don't have any idea because we don't know. It's an uncertain time. And I felt the necessity for something to help tide us over. And at the same time, to provide for not only community involvement on an individual level, but also community involvement among our corporate taxpayers. I'm sure there are things they would like to be involved with and places that we can get them involved, and more than in just a financial sense, by furnishing volunteers, by working together with us on projects, things like that. And I thought this was the best way to go about it. The bylaws that are set forth today are, and correct me if I'm wrong, Counselor, but they're basically a boilerplate that has been modified a little bit to fit our needs. Going forward, we still have to establish what this is, what costs are involved, and we have to establish an infrastructure by which we can determine how, when, and where community stakeholders are going to be involved. That's what I have for now. Anybody has any questions they want to ask of me? Comments? Cheers, boos?
I have some questions, but I'm going to let everybody else speak. Erin, you had your hand up?
I've been thinking about this a little bit, and I'm not sure we should do this. I don't really understand the point of us starting a non-for-profit arm. I think it might be a waste of our money, and some of our staff doesn't really have time to go out and like fundraise for this, you know what I mean? The last donation we got was in 2005 for the carousel, which was 15 years ago. And every donation that we get, we can always do a separate MOU for that. So I just don't understand the point of it.
Well, it's the last donation we got was for the carousel. That was a corporate donation. And yeah, for large corporate donations, we can do MOUs. But I'll go back to the original science playground, where individual donations were solicited and taken and used. I think this is, I don't want to say one size fits all, but I think this is an easier venue for accommodating community participation. We have to work out how much time needs to be spent with it, who's going to be spending that time, and what our costs are. And it goes without saying, if we're looking at extensive costs, if we're looking at an extensive amount of time, an inordinate amount of time being spent by staff to make this work, then definitely it has to be rethought. But I think it's a good way for us to go forward, especially in light of the uncertain times we face.
Mr. Rollins, you had your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Like Aaron, I've been thinking about this as well, and the initial sounding of the foundation sounded interesting, and I think Jake did a nice job of formulating the articles and the bylaws. It occurred to me too that we really don't have a project in mind that people could get behind, because we haven't thought thought about this very much or had any much discussion. And unless you had a project, it's kind of hard for people to get behind and start funding. And as a organization that collects ad valorem revenue, it seems like inconsistent with what we do because of the fact that, like we did with the tower at Gumbo Limbo, you can do an MOU. I think fundraising and getting the message out would be an expensive, labor-intensive proposition, and I don't want to see the district's funds that we have, which Steve's already alluded to, is already tight, and to spend getting this up and running, then nothing happened with the foundation as far as donations coming in. And as Steve mentioned, we don't know what the economy is going to do. We have a lot of businesses that may not recover. And I think corporations now are looking at their labor force because there's the uncertainty involved in the economy. I think if we had a project in mind to where we could do fundraising like we did with the initial Sugar Sand Park playground, might be a good idea. I'm not sure that the timing on this is right, but I don't want to walk away from the idea except to say that I like the idea. I like the articles. I think the bylaws summarize it pretty well. I just think we ought to put it on the shelf now until we have more specific input from people in the community as to a project that they may want to get behind. As otherwise, I think we would end up spending the district's money and not accomplish our objective in this current economic times.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Mr. Ernst, do you have something to add to this?
Sorry, I got a phone call on the other line. Is that for me?
Do you have anything to add about the first item of business, the foundation?
Yeah. I mean, here's kind of my thoughts on it. Is in a prior role, our board had a foundation, and you do need to have a foundation if you want to take in money for things. Usually the foundation has a connection to the legal community, and they're taking donations from people who have passed away and don't have things to donate, or that they don't have an avenue to donate. You have to be there to get it. If you don't have it, you won't get it. I think that Boca and the greater Boca area is a very wealthy community, and it's not a bad thing to have this foundation. That's why I supported it. But I understand it. To me, it's a question of how much time and how much priority goes into it and what's the cost. So there is value to finding out to how much cost would we incur on the whole thing, and then can we operate it effectively with it's not it's not going to consume a lot of time. And then number three, prioritize it. So when we first talked about this, my thought is okay, we could do the paperwork of the foundation, we can get everything going, but put it on the shelf and then figure out where it fits in our priorities. So every year we go through what is our priority activities for things. And so having that opportunity to take money into a foundation is a good thing, and it can create a nest egg that is later for future use. And it doesn't necessarily have to have a specific project. I would never envision you taking money in and spending it right away. We have plenty of stuff to work on. I mean, certainly Boca Chica, there's a whole opportunity that's on the horizon there. Sugar Sand, as beautiful as it is, there's plenty of opportunity there. It's a very massive park. And is it shaped right, for the future? And we also have the needs assessment out there that we haven't really gotten all the feedback on. So generally speaking, if it was, not too expensive, I would say get your foundation paperwork in order. Assume it is at a minimal, keep it on a minimal cost, get it set up. Periodically advertise it, that this is a tool for people if they want to donate something, through their will or something else, that they can do so. You know, and it's a good idea to have it because you're going to be surprised at what you get from that perspective. So I just think it's a matter of priority. It doesn't have to go all at once and right away. It can happen over time.
Well, I agree with you there, but it will need a mission statement. I've talked to Jacob about as far as the startup costs. He thinks that they're not excessive, but there are costs and there are ongoing things that would have to be done. You can't just create the foundation and not have the board meeting once a year at least.
Yep.
You're going to have an accountant or someone to monitor the books. And where's the money going to come from to fund it initially so that the accountant can be paid and our legal staff can be paid? So there are a lot of things that if we even do create it at this time, we're going to have expenses. And Brianne is going to probably have additional responsibilities, which I'm sure she's willing to take on, but she really, if we don't need to do it right now, it might be best if we just shelve it for a little while. So Jacob, how would we proceed with this at this point?
Well, it really, and thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. Just a couple quick observations, if I can. The objective in preparing and providing the backup was really to give the board a place to start a conversation based on the prior direction to our office. Commissioner Engel is correct in that to a great extent, some of the language included in both the articles and the bylaws is boilerplate, but it also includes some specific provisions that we tried to tailor to the district and to the board. For instance, we have the board of our board, the 5 of you sitting as the board of directors of this foundation. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but it's often the case when a local government creates a separate nonprofit. So there are a few things in there we did try to tailor specifically to the board. Hearing the discussion this evening, if there was an interest in tabling the item to some future date, it would simply take a motion to lay it on the table. And if in some number of months from now, any member of the board wanted to remove it from the table, it would just take a subsequent motion or direction to the executive director to place it back on an agenda for some further discussion down the road. Madam Chair, you're correct that from a startup perspective, the costs are relatively limited. We'd want to fine tune the documents a little bit. There's some initial filing fees. There's an annual filing fee to keep the nonprofit active in Tallahassee. And then there may be some accounting fees just with regards to coordination from our accountant to ensure that we preserve our IRS designation. If the objective, again, is to lay it on the table this evening and continue the discussion down the road, as a motion to that effect will get you there. If there's any questions about something specific in the backup, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much. What's your pleasure, commissioners?
Well,
Mr.
based
Rob.
on, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Steve.
Based on what I'm hearing, there doesn't seem to be much of an appetite to go ahead with this. I'm kind of surprised and I'm a little bit disappointed. The first thing that came to my mind was Ocean Strand. We're going to be spending another $120,000 to make the property ADA compliant. We were talking about volunteers to assist in the construction. A thought that came to my mind was we could arrange planting trees. That is a very widely used method of memorializing, doing it in memory of somebody, in honor of somebody. Michelle Peel has offered her time on a volunteer basis to help get started. I'm not acquainted with what the fees are. In the realm of things, I don't think it's a lot, and I don't think it's a lot to maintain. But if it's the pleasure of the rest of the members of the board to leave this for another time, I have to go with what the board wants. But I do think it's something worthwhile and something we should pay more attention to. And I think, like I said before, it's a very good way of getting the involvement of the stakeholders, whether it be private citizens or corporate entities. We need for people to gain an understanding of what we do. We're more under a microscope now than we've ever been. And I think this would put that microscope would give us a more positive lens, so to speak. And I think we should take advantage of every opportunity to present ourselves in a positive light to the community. But again, if it's the board's pleasure to defer this to another time, then, I can't twist arms. At least not from here.
Commissioner Rollins has his hand up.
And to address Steve's point, I don't think, I never thought it was a bad idea. We endorsed it, all in when the subject came up. But as you're reading the bylaws, you're coming to the conclusion, at least I did, that there's some effort that's got to be put into this to make it go. And, what staff person is going to put this into motion? Somebody, as Craig mentioned, has to be the front person on the fundraising. While we may not need a specific project, I think the way to get it started is probably with a specific project. I just, the resources that the district would have to commit financially may not be much direct cost, but indirect cost behind the scenes. I think there's some cost involved. I think it just needs some more thought as to the planning process, where we're going to go with this, how we're going to implement it, who's going to do the work behind the scenes, who's going to do the publications and get the word out. I think there's a lot more thought that needs to be put into it. And for now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to see us table this until we have some more information about how to make this go. The basic framework is there. And I don't have a definite timetable as to how to table it or who to direct to do the research on it. But I think if I'm gonna put this on you, Steve, if I was the one that made the motion, I would try to help get some ideas as to how to make it go. And for now, what I would recommend that we table this until another point in time where we have more information, like the actual cost involved, as well as the person who's going to do the planning and who's going to actually be the person who's going to implement the plan, and as Sue said, establish a mission statement. So my motion, I'll shorten it up, Craig, is that we table this until a future date, and as Jacob said, and someone wants to bring it up off the table.
Thank you, Mr. Rollins. Do I hear a second for his motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Wright. Is there any other discussion?
Yeah, just very quickly. Jake,
Yes, sir.
could I prevail upon you after this meeting, maybe tomorrow or the next day, to have a discussion? I think it was either you or Sam that mentioned that there are other special taxing districts and governing entities that do have separate and independent foundations, and I'd like to find out how they go about doing things.
There are a number of our municipal clients that we work with, some cities that have both rec foundations, they have water control districts. There are a number of different foundations. I'm aware of a city that has a 9/11 and a Veterans Foundation. So there are a number of different options and models we can look at, which may be able to provide both the board and staff some guidance as we move forward.
Okay. If you have some time over the next couple of days, if you could text me or email as to your availability, maybe we'll set up a quick conversation as to where I can get information. And
We have some resources we can connect you with.
That'd be great.
Happy to.
Ernst, you had your hand up?
Yep, Madam Chair, well, I sense that Steve is still willing to do some homework on this, so I want to support Steve on creating the foundation, but rather than tabling it quite yet, I don't think it's that much time or cost on an annual basis. I do think the indirect part, you know, depending on what you put into it, can be a lot. But I do want to point out that I'd be remiss in saying the National Parks and Recreation, I get their daily email, and I got to say that last week they had a whole discussion around foundations and the benefit of a foundation associated with the park. So while I agree we don't necessarily have the time for it, but let's not quite close the chapter on it. The due diligence here is find out how much it would cost on a minimal basis to operate it. I think it's pretty minimal. How much time would it take on a minimal basis to have it? And then the thought process, okay, how are you really going to promote it out there to gain funds? You know, maybe Steve's going to endow the first one. I don't know. Someone will at some point come along. And I would point out that, look, there are things and needs out there for a lot of different reasons. So the tower at Gumbo Limbo could have very well been the tower, you know, sponsored through the district doing that. And we really are a part of the community, and we're just guiding it. We have these other nonprofit groups who can help, but it doesn't hurt to have our own foundation, but it depends, you know, it depends on the time and effort, and that's a priority that would be there. So all I would ask is give Steve a little more time to do some of the due diligence on it and give us some time to find out what the annual cost would be before we completely shelf it. That's all.
Oh, I totally agree with you, Craig. It's not that anyone wants to do away with it, but at this time, we just need more specifics. So
Yes.
if you get that, there is a motion that has been seconded. Joanne, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Or Commissioner Ernst?
Can I make sure, can you reread the motion? Is the motion to completely shelf it, or is the motion just to get more due diligence?
It was
The motion was to table it, Craig. It didn't mean to shelve it. And as Jake said, and any member can bring this up to put it back on the agenda in the future.
Okay, after we get more information.
Yeah.
Okay, yes.
that was yes. Okay. Commissioner Engel?
I'm going to say yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang?
Yes,
And Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
we can revisit this later. Our next item is the employee evaluation process found on page 28 of your agenda packets. Brianne, would you like to start that off, please?
Yes. Just continuing on with some discussions that we had when we first implemented our employee handbook. I think it was about a little over a year ago. We talked about setting up a performance process, an employee performance evaluation process. So we put together some of that documents in this to review and kind of get some feedback from you all to start that conversation so that we can get a process in place. And we also, I wanted to incorporate, because I feel like if we're going to start doing performance evaluations and giving out raises, we probably need to solidify the job descriptions as well as the pay ranges. So when we had our HR consultant a couple of years ago, that individual did work out some job descriptions similar to the city's descriptions, but with some staff input on their specifics. So I included those here as well, and the ranges, and these are all things that once we adopt, obviously we need to periodically review them, and we even said that in our employee handbook that job descriptions would be periodically reviewed and that we would evaluate employees' performances. That was all part of the things that we incorporated in the employee handbook. So I did get some feedback over the weekend and also again today from a couple of you. I'm obviously open to any more feedback. I want to fine tune the job descriptions to a place where everybody's happy with them and get the pay ranges solidified. And then the same thing with the employee evaluation process. This form is one that I kind of adapted from the city's process. And I think it's important to put something in place so that, I mean, we're a small group, so everybody pretty much knows where they stand. And Melissa and I had a conversation today that she can kind of read my face at this point. She knows when I'm not happy about something or when I am happy about something. And we work on things as they come up, and we're a small group. So when things go awry or they need to be fixed, there's no there's not a whole group of people covering it up or trying to fix it. It's there, and we fix it and we address it and we get it taken care of. So there's very little room for things really going south for a long period of time, I guess, is the best way to say that. Or not the best way. I don't know if I'm losing everybody here, but anyway, this was just to start the conversation because we want to get these things solidified. It's important for staff that we have them in place. And if we don't want to commit to an annual raise, at least we commit to the performance appraisal or the performance reviews, and we talk about a place where everybody's comfortable, at least giving some monetary recognition to staff as well over time. So I'm open to comments, questions, and if I've confused everybody, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Brianne. We did talk about some things today, and one of the things that was brought up is that staff is not comfortable with the public discussion of their increases in their salaries. So we need to figure out a way that we can recognize them without bringing this up, even though it is part of the public record. Erin, you had your hand up?
No,
I'm sorry, I thought you did.
no. But I do think on that note that I think that the reviews, are absolutely necessary, but I do think they should be done not at a public meeting, for our staff. I think it's just awkward for reviews of our staff to be done at public meetings. I think that's totally fine. And even if it's not the chair every year, it should be one selected person of the commission or something each year, somebody different or whatever it may be. But I think that we should be reviewed in public because we're the elected officials, but they're staff members. They don't need to be reviewed in front of the public for the job that they're doing. I don't think.
Are you empathic? Because we had this discussion right before our meeting, and one of the things that came up was it doesn't have to be the chair, it has to be a member of the board, or it could be legal counsel, but it could be just any member of the board as long as the board designates. So
yeah, I think that's fine, and somebody can volunteer for it each year, or we vote for somebody to do it each year, whatever. I think that's fine.
Good. Mr. Rollins.
Wouldn't it be appropriate, though, for the members of the commission individually to be aware of the individual, annual appraisal of their duties? I mean, I'd like to know, and probably I would be spot on right now, with given our executive assistant and our facilities manager an excellent, exceeds expectation, because I've been very satisfied with the work of Brianne and her staff. But at the same token, it would be nice to be able to, and we could probably provide that one-on-one to the executive director, our comments about an individual, but it'd be nice to know who these individuals are, but without having to discuss it publicly, by having a private conference with our executive director and review those staff comments.
Jacob, is this a possibility to do it that way?
The answer is it's an option. There are a couple different ways to approach this issue, and keep in mind that the executive director really works for the five of you. I mean, she works for the board. Staff, the rest of the district employees, work for her. So there's a little bit of a separation as far as the reporting obligation between the executive director and the other positions with the district. What Commissioner Rollins is saying is perfectly appropriate. I mean, all members of the board could fill out an evaluation that then are submitted to the executive director, to Brianne, and then she can evaluate or review other members of staff. But the evaluations are certainly public record that other members of the board are entitled to review or entitled to see and weigh in on in the context of any employee's evaluation.
That's a good idea.
Just one other comment, Madam Chairman. In a governmental setting, I'm just wondering, I know the city of Boca gives cost of living increases annually, regardless of their ad valorem experience. as a smaller organization, I'm wondering if we're locking ourselves into a percentage automatically by saying that every year, you got the three different evaluations. And I told Brianne, the person in this requires improvement. I think we need to talk about, what kind of person that would fall in that category. When you have an employee that starts out, you have, a probationary period. And I would think that for an employee that started out, meets expectations and then later on starts drifting, I think we need to have a way to either improve that, put that person on an improvement plan, or look at some way to give them a career adjustment.
So what you're saying is, after an employee has been employed by the district, if something is not going well, that they should have a 3-month probationary period, and have a reevaluation?
I don't know that I would suggest a time frame for that, but I know in my office, when we have someone start out, we do put them on probation for 90 days. So, and it's an at-will state. So, if they're not performing to our satisfaction, and you counsel them along the way, you just don't wait 90 days and say your performance was poor, so we're not going to continue your employment. I think you have to have a plan to deal with those folks in that final category, whether they're new or seasoned with the district. I really wasn't sure, also, I think I read in there where there's some comment about a person's attendance, and I wouldn't want someone to lose their position because of a COVID experience, and then later on having another family matter that caused them to have some performance issues. So I think there's got to be some flexibility in this, but at the same token, that final category caused me a little concern because of the fact that requires improvement. How long will that take, and will it work? And should we include something in there about an improvement plan in this employee evaluation system?
Good point. Mr. Owens?
Similar to Bob, we're on the same page. I mean, be a little bit clearer on the percent increases. I was kind of in the camp of, look, if someone's not performing, it's 0. You don't automatically get an increase. So there's a range there, and I suggested this to. These can be targets, so maybe if you want to say them as targets, you could do that. But the range to me, and I suggested to Brianne earlier, was maybe 0 to 5%. And the reason I suggested that is because I think with a lot of stimulus, you could go for a future with a lot of inflation. So you may want to do something, but give their flexibility of range each year. That rate increase could be determined. Then the other aspect of it is it doesn't necessarily automatically have to be an annual performance increase. There are organizations where they give their increases a year and a half, or there's different things. As we all know, for our group, I think last year we focused on the retirement plan. Prior to that, we focused on the healthcare plan. There are a lot of different tools that we can adjust. So I do think it's important that every employee has a performance plan, but ways of financially benefiting the employees could be done in different ways. So it can be due through the retirement plan, it can be due through the medical plan, it can be due through peer pay. So as Bob suggested, I would just like to make sure it's flexible. It doesn't lock you in that every year you have to do something and every year you automatically get an increase because you're there. So they have to work, but I think we have a good staff, and so thank you, Brianne and Melissa and Joanna. They're really good folks. It's having this framework is good for them and for going forward in the future.
Thank you. Mr. Engel?
Yeah, I agree with both Bob and Craig about not having a a set percentage, it can cause a lot of problems down the road. Somebody who exceeds expectation for 5 years running gets a 5% increase every year. That can turn into significant money. And we need to see, what our budget requirements are. I grant you that payroll isn't a huge part of our expenses, but at some point, as we go further, as our responsibilities expand, we may feel the need to hire additional employees. And it may get to a point where we have 10 or 12 or 15 employees. And if all of them are doing at least the kind of job that Brianna and her staff are doing now, where, we may be locked in to 5% increases for 10 or 15 people over the course of 3 or 4 years. So I'd like to see that more tied in with what our budget situations are. I would like to say, though, one thing. I think depending on the economic situation, we should be able to look at cost of living increases on a year-to-year basis. When you don't have, when the cost of living is flat, it doesn't make sense to grant the cost of living increase. On the other hand, if you're looking at a 5% or 6% increase in the cost of living, then you can't expect employees to basically accept what would be a 5 or 6% cut in their pay because of circumstances beyond their control, be it the economy and inflation. So those are things I think we need to take into account.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Rollins, you have your hand up?
Yeah, and I think Steve and Craig make some good points. I like the idea of having some flex in the percentage of increase from a 0 to pick a number to 5%. It doesn't mean that you have to allocate that 5% every year to that individual. You could say, 3% would be adequate, and as Craig said, you don't have to do this evaluation every year, and you don't. If somebody's doing a really good job, you don't have to wait for a year to evaluate them and give them. I mean, there's nothing I like better than if an employee has really been performing in a superior fashion halfway through their annual evaluation period. I'm happy to give them a nice little pat on the back and a little extra in their payroll, in their paycheck. And I think if you have some flexibility in this, I believe that you can accomplish that and keep everybody happy. And in the same way, in the same token, keep in mind our economic situation with our expenses. And to Craig's point, there are other things that you consider that are expenses that we absorb, and that's the health insurance and the retirement plan. I think those are all a part of their payroll program. And when you start adding that up, those are some things that are not necessarily going in their paycheck, but are certainly helping support their lifestyle and their income.
Thank you. Brianne, would you like to explain to the commissioners, I'll get right to you, Aaron, about the caps that you were talking about so that they hear what you were thinking about as far as salary caps?
Yeah, so in the find it here. We did a computer swap during some of this, so Melissa's on IT tonight. So the salary caps, we use some of the city's salary caps. So it's a pay range, and basically it means that, if we're giving out annual evaluations or cost of living, it won't go, your salary can't exceed that amount. So at some point, if you get to the cap of your salary, you are just going to get a lump sum, and it wouldn't be factored into your retirement program or anything like that. It would just be a lump sum that you get every year, and you would never exceed that amount once you hit that cap. It's just a way to minimize costs. So if you have an employee, let's say that's here for 30 or 40 years, they don't exceed some exorbitant amount, I think that Steve had gotten into when he was talking earlier. So we did put ranges in, salary ranges in And that was in my letter, which I'll go through and find. Do you have it over there? I can't find this letter. It should have been page 28 in your packets, but for some reason I can't find 28 in my packet. Thanks. I'll do it tonight. So the executive assistant range would cap up at 72,000. So if she hit that top, that 72 at a certain point, she would never exceed that amount. She would just get a lump sum instead of an annual increase. And she's also an hourly employee, which would impact overtime and things like that down the road as well.
Commissioner Wright, you had your hand up?
Yeah. Am I on mute?
No, you're good.
Okay. I agree with Bob and Craig about the, you know, the 0 to 5%, and you can kind of pick and choose. But I do think having that extra incentive in your actual paycheck is important. I don't necessarily, I mean, I think we're a place that we should be providing healthcare, and we should be providing a retirement plan. And I think having that extra incentive in your actual paycheck that you see every 2 weeks is, you know, makes you keep good people and have good people working for you. So that's just my opinion on that.
Thank you. Leanne, would you like to massage some of these points that the commissioners have made, and then we'll revisit this our next meeting?
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to suggest, is that I'll take everybody's input and then fine tune this and come back. Maybe at the first meeting in November if we'd have other things that come up before our next meeting, but we'll get it addressed.
Is that all right with you, commissioners?
Sure.
Sounds good. Okay. Commissioner Ernst, approval of payroll and invoices found on page 35.
You're muted.
There you go. Can you hear me? Okay. Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion for approval for payroll and invoices for the total of $1,343,810.97.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Joanne, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Ernst?
Yes.
Commissioner Engel?
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins?
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsay?
Yes.
And Commissioner Wright?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Okay. It's time for reports and discussion items. Executive Director Harms, would you lead us off, please?
Yes. First thing I want to talk about is the Ocean Strand. We have, on Friday, Melissa and I met with city staff as well as Nate from AmeriCorps and Carol from AGT. We went out to the site because Recreation Services had some concerns about maintenance of the areas with the plans that they had put in place. So we walked through that with them. I think we came up with some good solutions. So I think city staff is going to be working with them to get them exactly what they need to get the permit process moving forward so that they can start removal of those invasives. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, they'll start that process, and that will be, it's going to really open up a lot of area in the park, which is already wide open, but it's going to be very revealing and see a lot more of the other trees and things that are hidden by some of those peppers. I also spoke with Dr. Dennis Frisch, former commissioner. He contacted me about the passing of our former executive director, Bob Langford, and talked about the donation that the Rotary had made to the carousel area and the fact that they had put those pedestals. I don't know if everybody remembers that the carousel has been closed, but there are some brick or concrete kind of pedestals around the carousel area, and some of those were dedicated, and there's 3 that are still blank. So he mentioned an idea is to dedicate one of those to Bob Langford and put some information out there about him on that. And they also want to probably try to finish out their dedications that they had started when the carousel was first put in. I wasn't here when the Rotary worked that out, and there was no MOU agreement written out for the Rotary as far as what they would get. But I think that they were responsible for putting in some of those and having those dedicated. So there's nothing concrete. We just had a conversation about it. I just want to let you know that they may come forward with some ideas about that or some proposals. And I'm just putting it out there as an idea for a tribute to Mr. Langford since it was brought up at the last meeting. And then my final point is, it was mentioned in the public comments from Mr. Miller regarding the MOU with Gumbo Limbo. At our last meeting, we had amended the agreement to split any overages over the $1.2 million amount between the Friends and the district, which I thought was very generous and more than reasonable on our behalf. But the Friends have stated that they will not sign an MOU like that. They'd rather remove all references to any overages. And then if it does become a case where the project is over 1.2 million, they want to revisit the discussion and talk about it with the city as well. I mean, historically, the city has never contributed to the Gumbo Limbo projects, and it's always been our responsibility. So without that language, I think that we are committing ourselves probably to any overages. I mean, we could certainly ask the Friends again, but they've made their case clear. I do, part of me feels a sense of, I guess, responsibility to the donors, because they want very badly to get this project moving and to get it done. And if we remove that language, we can sign the MOU, the city can continue the process. That's the quickest way forward. And for the Kozowskis, I feel like that's probably the best thing to do. And we're kind of, I would never suggest punting something down the road if it does get to be over 1.2 million, but in this particular case, just for the sake of the donors and that family, I think that we should remove the language. And then I think, down the road, Gumbo Limbo is very expensive. We're putting 12% of our entire budget into CIP projects at Gumbo Limbo this year. Those are things we need to look at. And probably when we talk about renegotiating any interlocal agreements, Red Reef is a good place to start, because I think it's the easiest one for us to get out of and renegotiate. We talk about some limits to Gumbo Limbo and some of our spending at that facility. Just a suggestion down the road, but we do need to make a decision on the MOU and if we want to change that language to get it approved.
Commissioner Wright, you had a question.
Yeah. So how the Kozowskis are putting up how much for the tower total?
Well,
donating.
My understanding, there's some confusion about how much has been donated. Anywhere between 500,000 and 600,000 has been contributed towards this project to the Friends of Gumbo Limbo. And
right,
so
we should know that amount, right? I mean,
we should. I've heard 510 is what I've heard from the current director of the Friends. I have heard other numbers up to 600,000 has been contributed. So we're waiting for some clarity on that.
Right. So the Friends actually aren't putting anything towards the tower as of now.
They are the conduit for all the donations. That's basically what it boils down to.
Right. So I don't see why that was asking too much to split any overages that came up in terms of the project.
I thought it was reasonable.
But I also, on your point, sorry?
But Friends was putting in another 100,000.
Well, that may be donated money. I don't know. I don't think it's out of there. I think it's going to be money that's donated in the name of this project and not necessarily out of the Friends bottom line.
Okay.
So I don't think it's asking too much for the Friends to put in half of the overage, but I also don't want it to hold up the project anymore, because I know that family wants to get to see that tower up. So I don't know. It kind of puts us in a difficult position.
Commissioner Ernst, you had your hand up?
Yeah, just a couple things. First, on the tower itself, I agree and hear what Aaron's saying. It doesn't seem unreasonable what we asked for, but the first priority is, do we even have plans to evaluate? And so I'll give you what I know about it, is that the city is working on those plans. So once they develop those plans or show us the plans, that will determine the true nature of the project costs.
There are plans. There are plans.
Have they been distributed yet at all? Because I don't think they have. No, I know the Kozowskis have not received those plans or seen them yet. So that would be good to see. But I also know that the project was based on, this current tower platform was based on a St. Petersburg tower that required lumber to be transported into a wooded area by hand. And so that tower came in around 800 or 900,000. So, and there's I think they were talking about a 20% contingency on this tower baked into that 1.2 million. So in true city fashion, it is a very well, robust project. So it will be hard to believe if they come in at 1.2 million or higher. The priority is to get it out to bid and to find out how it goes in the bidding process in this current environment we're in, and can they build it, and what is the cost of it, and go from there. As far as the Friends go, yeah, it's a little disappointing. I'm not quite sure how much they are really contributing. But I also sense that the Friends have not been able to collect any revenue this year. So that's with no traffic going through Gumbo Limbo, that is a genuine concern. And I think there is just an overall question mark with the Friends. Is they're collecting money over the years. What are they spending it on? How are they contributing back and participating in these projects? We are certainly a bigger entity than the Friends, so we should step up and try to make this thing work. Just like the city is bigger than us. So us participating in financially in these projects, we have to look at where we can manage things. I think this is one project that we can manage. So I would support moving forward, strike the language and see where they come in with their RFPs and everything else, and find out if we actually do go over. I'm hopeful that they do not, and that they're well within their 1.2 million.
Commissioner Rollins, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. I think Craig raised some interesting points about, revenue that the Friends have generated, because they receive all the donations that come into Gumbo Limbo during the year. And I know there's a fairly significant foundation that they manage. And one of the things that I know, and I've talked to Michelle about this before, is that we need to know when they contribute something to the triage area for the turtles. It's helpful when we have these kind of discussions to know what they have actually, where they have assisted the Gumbo Limbo Nature Center financially with their collections that they've made, or their donations that they received from their donors as a nonprofit. But I'm hopeful that we'll come in at the $1.2 million. Historically, that's never happened with a city project, but I'm willing to step forward and say, yes, we'll take that language out, as Craig suggested, and with the idea that the Friends, in their benevolent nature, will sit down and talk with us about helping us with the overage. They didn't say no. The comment I had from Mr. Miller was basically that we don't know what the amount is, so we can't commit to it. I understand that. But once we have the amount, I hope that they'll agree with us to help and share in it. But I don't want to hold the project up by keeping that language in there. And I would like to see us take the language out so we can move forward. As Brianne said, the family's been very patient, and I think it's time we move this project forward, and that's what I would recommend we do.
Is there a way that we can encourage the city to go out for this RFP ASAP?
We can. I will.
We need a letter to show our enthusiasm and our desire.
We'll put that out there.
Okay. Okay.
Do I need to make a motion, Madam Chairman, to strike that language?
I think that would be a wise choice.
Agreed.
Okay. Then I would like to make a motion that we remove the language that requires the Friends of Gumbo Limbo to participate in half of the overage in the construction of the tower.
I second it.
Second, Mr. Ernst, thank you. Is there any more discussion? Joanne, would you please do a roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes.
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes,
and Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
thank you. Is there anything else, Ms. Harms?
That's all I had tonight. Thank you.
Okay, time for district council, Mr. Horowitz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just very briefly, and thank you for pulling item number 2 on our agenda this evening regarding the Ocean Strand Declaration. That will come back likely at the next meeting, but just for the board's edification, we did have an opportunity to speak with the chair earlier today, and she was pulled at our request. We are still waiting to hear back from the title company with regards to some information that was received following last meeting. You may recall that Sam at the last meeting provided a brief update with regards to the 3 out parcels that have been identified. The TSR, which is the title search report that was received, carves out those 3 parcels and identifies both the district and the city as the joint owners of the parcels. However, the deeds from 1994 that we've since received do not reference the joint ownership. So there's a potential inconsistency. So we're just continuing to dig a little deeper on that point. And once we get that sorted out with the title company, once we hear back from them on that issue, we'll update the board further. So that was the reason for the, for pulling the item this evening. We're just waiting to get a complete story in order to fully update the board. So thank you for that. The only other update I would offer, I know that we're meeting by Zoom this evening. You know that very late last week at the 11th hour, the governor extended EO 20-69, which was the executive order that allows for these virtual meetings. By all indications, when he did extend that order through the month of October, he advised that local government should be ready to resume normal operations come November 1st. So we do suspect this will be the last extension. Just wanted the board to know that for the record, but those are the 2 items I had this evening, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horowitz. We appreciate everything. Commissioners' reports. Mr. Engel.
Oh, thank you. I am going to reiterate my disappointment that we can't get the foundation off and running, but I understand the feelings of the other commissioners. And so I will do some research and come back to everybody with my report. We did give, there were a few examples given of community participation even prior to having a foundation, and I think we should bear those in mind. There's definitely an appetite for it. Other than that, that's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Ernst.
Yeah, just one thought. I hate to open this can of worms, but I did hear back from an elected official related to golf, and that there is, things that are still in the works, and to be patient. And so, at our prior meeting, we talked about a public records request and other things. I think it's no secret amongst this group or the public that the city is looking at an opportunity possibly for an additional golf course. And I would say let's keep letting it play out. I don't know what the outcome will be. It could be nothing. It definitely does impact Ocean Breeze as a golf course, or in the Boca Chica community. But I'm optimistic that whatever happens, it's all good for the community, and we just have to be patient. That's my comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Wright?
I have nothing today.
Okay. Commissioner Rollins?
Yeah, well, to follow up with Greg, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. And I think that's where I see us with that scenario that Craig described. The question to Jake, I was on the commission at the time we purchased with our hard-earned money those 3 parcels of land that we negotiated with Veet, Lecta Pace, and I forget the third person. So, and I don't believe that the city was on, we didn't borrow money for those parcels. We did on the major component of Ocean Strand. And when we paid off that debt, we did ask for and receive from the city the title to that property. So it's clear in my mind that the district is the owner of those 3 parcels, and the city doesn't have any right to any part of that title because of the fact that I think we paid that out of our ad valorem revenue at the time we purchased those over a 2 or 3 year time frame, I believe.
Thank you for that. It's very helpful to know. Thank you.
And I have nothing else, Madam Chair.
Contact former Mayor Bill Smith tomorrow and see if he remembers how that all played out. Unless you want to do it, Commissioner Rollins, either one of us.
I'll be happy to do that investigation because it's pretty clear to me that we, in our records, if we had those, would show that we, purchased that ourselves directly with those individuals and negotiated the purchase of those property. But I'll come back at our next meeting with some hard data for you.
Thank you very much. All right, commissioners, I think we had a very successful meeting. I have nothing else to add. My item was the tower RFP, so I'm hoping that will go out and we'll get started on that. I did speak to an engineer, a structural engineer. He's confident that it should come in well under $1.2 million. So maybe he's just trying to get another meal out of his mom. So any other future agenda items, Brianne, besides the Ocean Strand resolution?
No, not at the next meeting, but the weekend, the meeting after that, we'll have the RFPs. We're gonna have the RFPs back next Friday for the pickleball courts.
Okay.
So we'll need to look at those in the first meeting in November. And then we'll hopefully be able to talk about some of our projects and maybe we look at how we want to prioritize that this year, the ones that we've approved, and give an update on them.
Okay, great. Well, Mr. Engel,
Move to adjourn.
we're here a second.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Hearing none. Joanne, would you do a roll call, please?
Or Commissioner Ernst,
Yes.
Commissioner Engel,
Yes?
Commissioner Rollins,
Yes.
Commissioner Vogelsang,
Yes.
and Commissioner Wright.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Meeting is adjourned. Stay safe and healthy, everybody. See you in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Jacob.
Everybody, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.